So this particular repo has a Contoso data model, and it has a number of issues defined. I'm basically trying to replicate a proper team workflow here, where a team collectively works on a new release. Different people pick up different issues, and ultimately it all gets merged into a new release. So we have version 1.0 out in production right now, and we have a new milestone defined, which is for the 1.1 release. So basically 1.0 plus additional things. We've got that defined as a milestone here, and that's basically a container around different issues. And we can see 1 is already closed, and 6 are still open. And in fact, except for the last one, which I only added earlier today, all the others are already implemented. So we can sort of fast forward a little bit. And I just wanted to demonstrate what an ideal workflow would look like if someone came into the project and actually were tasked to work on a particular issue, and what that looks like from a workflow point of view. So the issue is upgrade the project to actually use the latest release of pbi-tools. When this one was set up back in May, it was set up with whatever pbi-tools release was the latest at that point in time. And so that's relatively straightforward, I'd say. If I go in my VS Code view, I'm just going to make the font a little bigger so you can see it better. This is my project. I can see I'm currently on a issue branch. So I'm not on the main branch. Main branch always represents what's in production. I'm actually on a specific branch where, in this particular case, work on issue 7 is happening. And so the issue 7 is actually completed. Just take my word for it. The one I want to work with now is 11, right? So we can see that here. So the first thing to do would be to create a new branch. I've got a naming convention here, which in the recording I mentioned earlier, I talk about in more detail. So following the convention, I would basically call this issue 11 and then put my initials there. So I've got a new branch now where I can basically start making changes to my sources. Ultimately, this is already CI/CD enabled, which means anything that gets pushed into GitHub will then automatically get deployed into a particular environment. And there's actually an issue with the deployment, which we can very easily see. So if I run a deployment locally in what-if mode, a particular problem is going to come up straight away. And the problem here is that the latest preview release of pbi-tools had some minor breaking changes with regard to the deployment manifest. And those breaking changes actually come through here. It was something related to how refreshes are defined in the manifest. So it's absolutely vital, as we can see, that this project gets upgraded to the latest version because we can't even run it locally right now. For reference, if I go back here quickly, in pbi-tools issue 165, I actually talked about this very same problem, and I explained how that came about and what to do. As you can see, that happened over a month ago on the 2nd of August. So going back here, the issue is, as I said earlier, my deployment manifest now needs to be defined slightly differently. And that is actually relevant down here. So where we have environment-specific refresh settings. Previously, we had an opt-in model, which was basically just a Boolean flag. You set true or false if you wanted a refresh to run for that particular environment. Now, it's no longer Boolean. Now it's actually expecting an object, and that's because the latest preview allows to make more substantial environment-specific refresh changes. So, for instance, for different environments, you could set completely different refresh types. You know, you could switch between full and automatic, for instance, or in specific environments, you could disable or enable certain tables or partitions to be refreshed. And so that's why it needs to be declared as a object now, because we could potentially put we could potentially put you know, relatively complex information in here. And the other thing that's necessary is where we have the global definition for refresh, we now need to enable refreshes, and there we go. So that's the difference, basically. Enabling refresh happens globally, and then at the environment level, you can selectively disable it. So it's an opt-out rather than opt-in model now. So this should do, and I can very easily test that. You know, the advantage of being able to run everything locally comes through here, and as we can see, all right, so we can see there's still a problem in the UAT environment. So probably got something wrong here. Yes, don't know how that happened, but I think I know how that happened, because I accidentally changed the report setting. So there we go. And if I then try again, everything is good. So the manifest is now valid. It can be read. And here we go. So we've run things in what if mode, which means most things are being validated. However, nothing's being sent across, you know, to Power BI or anywhere else. So it's completely safe. So that's that. And I happen to know that there's something else we also need to change, but I'm just pretending, you know, that I'm a developer now who hasn't fully thought this through. So I'm pretending that I think I've actually completed my task. So what would I do? I would basically state this particular change, and then I would say, let's say upgraded deployment manifest to be compatible with preview 4. So that's that. However, there's one really important thing which I haven't done yet, which is if you want to get the full benefit of a system like GitHub or Azure DevOps, whenever you actually commit something, you want to put a reference in your commit message referencing the underlying issue number. So I'm working on issue number 11 right now, and the convention for that is that you put hash and the issue number there, and then the system will automatically pick up that this is actually something which is linked to that particular issue, and it will actually produce some very convenient hyperlinks. So really important, and it has to be the first thing that you always think about when you put a commit message in place. You should never forget an issue number, nor should you ever commit anything that's not actually related to an issue, because then you have no idea what the context is for it. Okay, cool. So if I commit that now, I can publish my branch, and there we go. If we then switch over to GitHub and go to that same repo, we can see the new branch was detected, and it's also telling us that something had been pushed. If we go to actions, there's nothing happening right now because we haven't set up our CI/CD pipeline so that anytime something gets pushed, a pipeline gets run. What I need to do instead, I need to actually create a pull request. So pull request means I, as a developer, think I've completed my task. I'm creating a pull request so that my manager or my engineering owner or release owner or whoever is in charge of reviewing and signing off things actually has something to look at, right? And that would be the pull request rather than an individual commit. So what I can do now, GitHub, as you can see, is super convenient. It pretty much gives me a button for this new branch, which I simply need to follow. So I want to say, this should ultimately go into my release branch. This is not a change. I want to go straight into production. And again, here it's good practice to reference the underlying issue as well. So I'm just going to say, what was it? Upgraded to pbi-tools preview 4. Here we go. Right. And now this one is integrated with CI/CD. So looking down here, we can see that something's now happening. This is actually where automation comes in. And this is also where I, as a developer, I'm going to get very immediate feedback. So we basically said when setting up the pipeline here, every time either a new pull request is opened or something is getting added to the pull request, a development pipeline should get run automatically. And we can see something's failed. Obviously, that's what I wanted, right? So not a surprise. But I wanted to demonstrate how quick it was for me to actually get that feedback, right? And it also means that my manager, for instance, it doesn't even have to get involved here because at this point, this isn't even succeeding. So there's no point actually reviewing anything. So let's see what failed here. And there we go. So we're looking straight into the log from that particular CI/CD job. And what's happened is basically the reverse of the correction I did earlier, right? So basically on my machine, I've got the latest pbi-tools version. So that wasn't able to read the old manifest. This pipeline is still using the old pbi-tools version, which obviously isn't able to read the new manifest, right? So basically the second thing I need to do, I need to ensure that I'm actually upgrading not just the manifest itself, but also the pbi-tools version I'm referencing. And that's what I wanted to demonstrate here. So if I go back and complete my task, which I would basically do inside my GitHub workflow YAML files, this one right here, where I'm referencing the container image, that's basically where I'm saying which version of pbi-tools should be run. So I don't need to remember the version I'm looking for. I can just look that one up quite easily. If I go to GitHub pbi-tools, I've got packages here. There happens to be one single package, so that's quite convenient. We've got pbi-tools core here, so that's the Docker image we're looking for. And then I can see this one here is preview 4, so that's the one I'm looking for. And all I need to do is to basically copy this tag or this label, go back here and make sure that it gets replaced. And in fact, because I need to change it in 3 different places, I can actually help myself by using the find in files feature. So here we go. It's finding it in the dev YAML file. It's finding it in the UAT YAML file, which is quite weird because I would also expect it in here, RC2. Interesting. See, so that's another thing which I didn't even notice previously. So it looks like dev and UAT were upgraded, but production wasn't. So production is still on a much older version, the one from May, and that was actually a very good way of finding out. So let me change this one and that one, and then let me go into production and override this one explicitly. And if I then go and see my changes, I would expect that each one of those files, each one represents a particular environment, basically has a similar type of change where we're now referencing preview 4 instead of what was there before. So there we go. So that's all good. Cool. So I think I've got my job done. So same thing as before, start off by referencing the issue number, and then let's say upgraded the container, upgraded the image version in all GitHub YAML files. There we go. So if I commit that and sync, this time it doesn't have to create that branch because it already exists. So it just only has to push into the branch. What's now happening is I'm getting full automation in the sense that the same pull request I opened earlier will now pick up this new change. And we can see if we go to checks, there we go, that another pipeline run was triggered. And this one should now succeed because it's got an upgraded manifest, and it also has an upgraded YAML file. And there we go. So that's already it's already gone much further than where we were before. And we've seen that this actually worked very nicely. So it's now starting a full refresh. However, don't panic. It's just going to take a few seconds. It's obviously a demo data set, so that has a very small file. There we go. Only a very few files to read, and that's done. So that's pretty much the gist of what I wanted to show. So just going back to the pull request, this is the one, 11. We can see, first of all, because this particular branch was created on top of the issue 7 branch, which in turn was created on top of various other branches. This pull request now actually happens to be an aggregate of a whole range of changes, including the most recent one, the changes I added earlier. And we can see this was my first commitment. Commit, after which we had a failed pipeline, then my second commit, after which we had a successful pipeline. So very nice. We can see everything is green. When it says checks have passed, it basically means the corresponding pipeline succeeded. And we are basically good to go in terms of confirming this and merging the pull request, which would mean that it goes into a release branch.